Working on this Chevette. Update that I didn't film is I got the master cylinder in, or the slave cylinder in. Had to have a custom line made because it ended up being about 3 or 4 inches too short. Got it hooked to the pedal, and I actually have a clutch now, so that's cool. And also, excuse that, someone's shooting out back. Got a hole cut in the floor there for the shifter, so we'll get working on that also, maybe making a shifter or buying one. But what we're going to work on right now is oil lines for the turbo. So I got this box off eBay. I'm sure they're real high quality. It's got some stuff to work on the feed line and the return line. So we'll get to working on that and see how that goes. Got this upper line ran, got the flange bolted on there, and this is a line that came with it. And there's a little T back there so I can run my oil pressure gauge off of that also. Not sure if this is going to work. It doesn't feel very quality when I put it together, but if it doesn't leak, I'll use it. Working on the return line over here, getting ready to put this thing up in the air. But I went ahead and put one end on. It's just a 15, 45, 30 degrees, something bend here. And then I put one cap on this side because I don't know if I want the 45 or the bend, and then there's a straight one that I could also use. So we'll get it up in the air and see what it looks like, what's going to work best, and go from there. Got the lower oil line on. It's bolted in up there. We're going to trim this line and probably try to go in. Can't really see where I marked it, but somewhere right in here on the front of the pan down towards the bottom. I've got the fitting over here. It's a no weld fitting because I don't want to try to weld to the oil pan. It just sandwiches it in there with some rubber washers. So now we're going to pull the turbo back off, pull the crossover pipe out, and then pull the oil pan off and get that hole drilled in it. Unbolted the steering rack, got the oil pan off of the car. Been rolling the motor over by hand to see that we can clear the counterweights and the ring or the rods by where we're placing the bolt or the drain. Got the oil pan sitting over here on the table. I'm gonna drill it right about here somewhere, and then we'll put this fitting down through there, and that should work out pretty good. Got the oil drain line put on. It's not tight, it's just sitting up there because it'll probably end up coming apart again. Got it here, and we got it the angled fittings. I don't know what angle that is, but just had them holding it away from this exhaust, so we'll try to keep some heat out of that. But our fitting is in the sump there, or in the pan. It doesn't seem to hit anything whenever the crank's going over, so at least we got that part of it done. Under the hood today, or lack thereof, got the wiring harness in the mail from it's a PSI conversions harness for standalone. Trying to figure out exactly where everything's going to go so I can see where to cut a hole in the firewall, because this harness has a grommet that'll pop through, and then everything in here, all of this is mounted inside. So I'm kind of laying it up here where it's kind of going to go. Got that side setting on there, and don't have my book with me, so I don't know what all these plugs go to. But probably gonna end up cutting the hole. Oh, sorry, right in there somewhere. Keep it out of sight, out of mind. Which will end up under the dash, which you can't really see because it's so dark. But got the wiring harness kind of set up in here. Most of the stuff's plugged in. Some stuff I can't plug in yet because I don't have it. There's a coolant sensor on the water pump that needs to be plugged in. This kit uses a newer coil that only has one plug instead of the dual plug, so I got that coming. Once I get this all tucked down, it should look decent. I might keep my eyes out for a set of Corvette covers that go right here, because that would cover up a lot of the mess and make it look a lot better. But that'll be something way down the road. I just want to working on getting this thing fired up, see if this motor's any good that I put together, because you never know with me. Working on the radiator mount for this car. I'm going to reuse the old radiator that I had because it was plenty big for the car. I'm going to mount it off of this beam, or this bar here that I welded in before. So I'm planning on having it come out and then just go across and tie back in. I've got some more of this 1-inch square tubing here, and then we'll put some little feet on there to hold the radiator in the middle. And once we get it held up from the bottom, then I'll lower the car back down and build a little plate to go over the top, hopefully that'll hold it down. Here's the basic frame for the radiator mount for the car. It's just 1-inch square tubing. It'll go on, it'll be under the radiator like this to hold it up, and then I'll build some little feet that'll hold it with some rubber on them so we don't wear a hole in the radiator. And that'll go under the car basically like this somewhere. Once I figure out where it needs to go, it'll just weld it to that bar underneath, and that'll hold the radiator up. Here are the mounts I made for the radiator. They're just little pieces of round stock that I bent into a U shape, and then what I did is I took a piece of hose and I cut the back off of the middle part, so then this will sit down over the radiator like that, and then I'll just weld the metal here to my radiator mount, which I got welded in down there. I ended up putting some spacers under it to lower it down just to make sure I could clear the hood. So these will sit up here like this, and weld the radiator on, or weld the mounts on, and that'll hold the radiator on the bottom, and then we can move up top and figure out how to mount the top of it. Got the radiator mounts pretty much done. I did the same basic thing on the bottom as I did on the top. I used a piece of rubber hose over a piece of round bar or round stock, and then I bent up this little piece of sheet metal as a strap. I got to get a bolt that actually fits in there because I didn't have any small hardware. Got this side screwed in. I had a screw that fit in there, but it's solid, so that'll work. I used my rivet insert or nutsert tool. So that was the first time using that, and that worked well. Got the water pump installed, just had that come in the mail from Amazon. Got the turbo off. Gonna work on an alternator mount. Originally on this motor, the alternator sits right here, but clearly we can't do that anymore. So what I'm gonna try to do is mount it down here, because all I have to run is the alternator off this motor, since the water pump is mechanical and driven off the camshaft. So I'm going to try to figure out how to run the alternator down there. I've done it before on my other, with this car with another motor in it, so it shouldn't be too bad to make a mount to mount it down there. Here's the alternator mount that we came up with. This top piece up here, that's a piece of 3/8 plate that's bolted here and there to the block. And this is an old bracket that I modified to give the alternator its twist back and forth. And so it's not quite done yet. I got to make it look a little better but that's basically what we're going for. Not a lot of room in here between the frame rail, and then there's also not a lot of room on the top side between the engine block. So we'll have to make sure that this belt's going to work. If not, we can grind a little bit off of the block right there, because it's got a casting mark that sticks out about 1/8 of an inch. And if we had to, we could bang this frame rail in a little bit, but right now it's in about the middle of its throw, and the belt's tight, so I'm thinking that'll work. Working on getting these exhausts set up for O2 sensors. I'm going to put one there and one over here. Excuse the scribbly line, I couldn't see where my Sharpie was. But I've got some bungs for the O2 sensors right here. They got the plugs in them so I don't screw up the threads, and we're going to try to get these welded in on this crossover pipe so we're that much closer to getting this thing started. We've got some radiator hoses installed on this thing. Filling it up with water. We're going to start it and let it run. We put the turbo on it, took the glass pack off, and we also unplugged the mass airflow sensor. So you'll hear what it sounds like now with this setup on here.